go. Let me know.
We're live.
Live. Yay. It is another special Sunday session of Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, whatever you want to call it. It's the love of our lives. And we have a special guest this week. But as normal, I am Old New Dude. He is
Richard York, extra Streamer and Son.
And our special guest host is
the Green Bard, your purveyor of the Bard's truth.
And for the one or two people that watch this that don't know who he is, please go check out his stuff. I mean, I was telling Lady Smallwood, I forget the first name on it. She's gonna get her husband to watch. So I'm like, go ahead and tell him that it's low energy. Well, maybe not low energy, low tech, very small, and we just like to talk is all it is. And hopefully she'll get her husband watching. That'll give her viewers up to 3. But this week it is a Game of Thrones Eddard 15, which will be his last chapter. It's not a long chapter, but there's still a lot in there. And normally what we do, if you watch any of these, Richard will go down what he saw in the chapter, and then I'll jump in with my stupid stuff. But with the guest host here, I'll give him first dibs on jumping in on what he sees, and we'll go from there. So, as always, take it away, Richard.
All right, sounds good. The straw on the floor stank of urine. There was no window, no bed, not even a slop bucket. He remembered walls of pale red stone festooned with patches of nitre, a gray door of splintered wood, 4 inches thick and studded with iron. He'd seen them briefly, a quick glimpse as they shoved him inside. Once the door had slammed shut, he had seen no more. The dark was absolute. He had as well been blind, or dead, buried with his king. Ah, Robert, he murmured as his groping hand touched a cold stone wall, his leg throbbing with every motion. He remembered the jest the king had shared in the crypts of Winterfell, as the kings of winter looked on with cold stone eyes. The king eats, Robert had said, and the hand takes the shit. Now, how he had laughed. Yet he'd gotten it wrong. The king dies, Ned Stark thought, and the hand is buried. Well, just about every Eddard chapter told us this was coming. I mean, you look back, it starts off, right, that Robert wants to take Ned down into the crypts, right? He's going to see graves. Then they realize they rode out into the Barrowlands, onto a graveyard. Then he kills a direwolf, right? And then Littlefinger tells him he's going to slit his throat and bury him behind the walls of the dungeons, right? And I mean, it's just we've been told a lot. This is coming.
Yeah, and in that same chapter, I think he says, "I'll Lady Catelyn, I'll try to keep your husband alive," right? I'll try.
He didn't try that hard.
No. Well, I mean, if it had been politically expedient for him to keep Ned alive, he may have, right? But
yeah,
you're right.
Other
than that,
I think he genuinely would have liked the opportunity to be Ned's most trusted advisor as Ned was regent, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
going to be in charge.
Yeah, if Ned would have took that advice, Ned would still be alive for the moment in the story. You never know how long Littlefinger will let him live
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yet in the end, he blamed himself. "Fool!" he cried to the darkness. "Thrice damned blind fool!" Cersei Lannister's face seemed to float before him in the darkness. Her hair was full of sunlight, but there was mockery in her smile. "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die," she whispered. Ned had played and lost, and his men had paid the price of his folly with their life's blood. He played well right up until he, the man who holds Theon Greyjoy as a hostage to control a man declared king, decided taking the Queen's child hostage was something he couldn't do.
Yep, as that little hidden fingers nudge.
For how long he could not say. There was no sun and no moon. We get a whole lot of various long night symbolism throughout the books that talks about there being no stars and no moon or no sun. There's days without a sun because it's rainy and so forth. And so they're constantly referring to it as no sun, no moon, no stars kind of thing.
It's interesting you mentioned Eddard not taking Joffrey into custody, right? even at the end of the last chapter, when he's in the throne room, he actually said to combine them all together. He did not say to separate Joffrey from the rest of his family. So Ned was, you're right, he was firm on that right to the end, but it's kind of odd that was the tack he took on it, isn't it?
Right. I mean, that's the whole point of Theon's been there. Theon was younger than Joffrey is when they took Theon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the recall of what happened to Rhaegar's children in that throne room is still one of those memories that hidden forces are plucking just to keep Ned going down the path that they want him to go down to get to a certain situation. Like Ned has to be a traitor so Jon can save Mormont. I think I said that last time. I mean, there's a lot of hidden going on in this chapter and in the story itself.
When he slept, he dreamed dark, disturbing dreams of blood and broken promises. So Casey and I believe Ned promised to protect 3 children of Targaryen blood, and failing to protect Dany, along with abandoning Ashara, are at least 2 broken promises. I'm curious what Guy thinks are the broken promises.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, whatever he promised Lyanna is the main broken promise. Did he break other promises? Yeah, I think he feels like he broke some promises to Catelyn as far as marriage vows, right? Because he had to conceal truths from her, right? So regardless of what child it was, and I mean,
he lived his lies for 14 years and so forth, right?
He definitely lied to her for one way or the other, whether it was some baby swap and Jon is B plus A, or whether it was R plus L equals J or whatever. He lied about that to his wife based on keeping the whole truth of what happened at the Tower of Joy and in Starfall a secret.
Yeah, and of course he was feeling dishonest about the way that he switched to heir, like so. And if you do believe in triplet Targaryens, then and especially if you believe that the kids are actually Targaryens, then it's very similar to his promise to Robert that he broke and his promise to Lyanna that he broke her. Very similar.
Right. He also
the royal Targaryen children that he's promising to protect and failing.
Yeah, he also lied to Robert, right? So in and I think the show adaptation, I didn't read one of the early chapters, but I recently rewatched episode 2 of season 1, and you can see when Robert is teasing him about his woman Wyla, right? Mm-hmm. And he just shuts down that conversation right away. It's not just that he wants to conceal truth; it's that he doesn't like lying to Robert, right? So I will. You'll never hear me talk about it, right? He immediately wants to leave that conversation because it hurts him to conceal, to not be truthful, right?
Right. It's he kind of gets mad at Robert there, and Kat talks about how when she brought up Ashara Dane's name, he got mad at her and so forth, right? So anytime there's a John's mother's name coming up, he tends to get angry.
Well, I think that lies beget lies. I mean, once you start with one lie, then there's another lie, then there's another lie, and it's just a snowball effect trying to protect the first lie. And Ned hates lying so much, he knows that that's a slippery slope. Once he starts with Ashara, then there's so many other things that are tied to that lie that he doesn't want to get anywhere close to.
So, yeah, promises to Lyanna is chief, no matter what those promises were. And it is multiple promises. That's the other thing I feel strongly about. He didn't just say, I will do this to this child, right? I will do this, plus I will not do this, tell somebody, whatever it is.
So there's definitely times where it sounds like he considers himself to have made multiple promises to Lyanna, but it also could be that it was one promise with 2 or 3 children, for example. That because you do see that plural, but it might be that it's literally one promise that he considers to be 2 or 3 separate promises.
Yep.
When he woke, there was nothing to do but think, and his waking thoughts were worse than nightmares. The thought of Kat was as painful as a bed of nettles. He wondered where she was, what she was doing. So I actually kind of realized you could take this a couple ways. So I always assumed this is the painful to miss Kat, but you could kind of see it as him being mad at Kat, right? The thought of Kat was as painful as a bed of nettles. He wondered where she was, what she was doing. He could be mad at her because she guided him to trust Littlefinger. In theory, I just thought of that as I was reading this time, and I was like, you could kind of take that multiple ways.
Well, I think he feels regretful for what he did in the relationship too. I absolutely, this can go back to the broken promises thing. But
Sure.
You're absolutely right. I mean, he had come off to everyone around him. Oh, I told her to do that. I told her to do that, right? Who wouldn't be resentful of having to
He starts the war and he just takes responsibility for it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To having to be put in that place. Sure. But in this case, I think, he knows where he's at and how he got there. He's blaming more himself than she, but yeah, there's probably a little bit of regret.
Well, and as with everything in these books, I think George intends to, I think he likes the concept of ambiguity and multiple interpretations.
Yeah.
He found himself thinking of Robert more and more. He saw the king as he had been in the flower of his youth, tall and handsome, his great antlered helm on his helm on his head, his warhammer in hand, sitting his horse like a horned god. He heard his laughter in the dark, saw his eyes blue and clear as mountain lakes. Look at us, Ned, Robert said. Gods, how did we come to this? You here and me killed by a pig? We want a throne together. I failed you, Robert, Ned thought. He could not say the words. I lied to you, hid the truth. I let them kill you. The king heard him. You stiff-necked fool, he muttered. Too proud to listen. Can you eat pride, Stark? Will honor shield your children? Cracks ran down his face, fissures opening in the flesh, and he reached up and ripped the mask away. It was not Robert at all. It was Littlefinger, grinning, mocking him. When he opened his mouth to speak, his lies turned to pale gray moths and took wing. So these words really could come from either of them. I kind of like the symbolism that almost seems like Littlefinger is a faceless man here.
Well, there are people that point to this specific chapter and say that Littlefinger has a glass candle and using it to enter dreams. Yeah. I think it's not a candle. He can actually do it without the candle. He's a skin changer, green seer, whatever you want to call him. For the simple fact is, up until this time, magic hasn't re-entered the world yet the way it does. The candles aren't lit yet.
Dragons aren't hatched.
Dragons aren't hatched. We don't have the comment. We don't have anything that people associate with setting the magic off. So it can't be a black candle.
Bran is the exception there. Bran, from the moment he falls, the magic is a big part of his story at that point, right? So
right. Well, I mean, it's the same as I say. Littlefinger was approached by the three-eyed crow. I say Euron was approached by the three-eyed crow. So these are people that become green seers or touch that magic, and then are forever changed from that point on. That magic was always there. It might not be as strong as it used to be, but he had the ability from the time that Brandon gave him the cut that about down there killed him, and that's when the three-eyed crow came to him. So that magic, it has been there. Because we have Bloodraven. He's been there for what, 100-something years? I mean, so that green seer magic has been out there for them to access. It's the fire magic. It's the magic's becoming stronger. Fire worshipers, or the male's magic getting stronger at the wall. All that stuff, especially the fire magic, has gotten stronger since either the dragons have been born or the comet has been born. But we hear nothing of anybody having lit a glass candle, because they've had one out of every maester, 100 maesters try to light the candle, and none of them can do it. And we don't know when Marwyn has his candle lit, but we don't hear of any other magic going on in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely implied that it happens after the dragons, right?
Yeah, right.
I think, in the Karth is the first time we hear about the glass candles are burning, right? It's not in Westeros. It's in
right.
So I think that we can consider the Birth of the Dragons to be the thing that kind of wakes up the glass candles, if you will, right?
I would agree with that.
So I'm totally with you, Casey, that if Littlefinger is doing this, he's doing it not with a glass candle, probably directly, right?
Right.
Now, that said, I hope you let me go a little further into this, because I think, it's right up my alley. I mentioned Bran, and I think we have a very clear parallel between Eddard and Bran here. Eddard is he's in sensory deprivation. He is in complete darkness. The chapter does a really good job at the beginning of making that clear, right?
Yeah.
He's also had a traumatic injury that is now causing him to have some semblance of fever dreams, right? So both those things are what we see help people develop those telepathic abilities in the story, right? With Bran, he has both. He has the traumatic injury. He's in a coma for, I don't know, was it a month maybe? And then in the next book, he's in the crypts for ages, right? I don't know how long they were in the crypts, six weeks, something like that, maybe. And so both those things happen to him in rapid succession, one book then the next. With Arya, she gets the blindness, right? That's the thing that they give it to her. And
right.
Obviously, you mentioned my channel. I'll go ahead and plug. I cover both, both the development of both those wargs very closely in my Direwolves of Winterfell series, and so it's really obvious to me that those are things that help them go that much deeper into the ability to warg, right?
Yeah.
Which of course, warging is a telepathic control or a telepathic bond, let's say, with the beast. In this case, a dog or a wolf. When you're a skin changer, if it's a bond with some other beast, and then of course with a dragon, I believe that the bond is very similar, and it's just not as much control. And I think the we can talk about the show later, but I think they showed in the last episode that control is not a thing you want to say is very strong when we're talking about a dragon bond.
Well, and it may change with how long you've been bonded as well, right? Because we do see the level of control with Rhaenys and with Daemon in the show. But anyway,
right.
We'll keep on.
It's on a continuum, just like all of this is, right? The strength of Arya versus the strength of Bran versus the strength of Jon Snow.
Well, and we see how slow it is for Bran to kind of gain his control over Summer as well, right?
It takes him a while, yeah.
Yeah, it takes him quite a while.
So it's both that experience and the strength of the magic in genetic magic that they have. And we know, segueing back to Eddard, we know that Eddard has that because all his kids have it, and there's no way they all just got it from Catelyn, right? So we know that Eddard has it latent up to this point. But I believe what we're seeing right here in this chapter is Eddard's third eye starting to peek open. Right.
Well, and interestingly, he was actually having wolf dreams a few chapters ago, 3 or 4 chapters ago, maybe.
Yeah.
He was actually having some wolf dreams where he was back in the Wolf's Wood at Winterfell.
Right. Yeah. So dreams is the first thing; it always shows up, and then this what we're seeing here. He's conscious, right? He's not dreaming. This is not a fever dream. He's awake. He's thinking things, and then he thinks about Cersei, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you're right, Richard. Part of it is his remembrance of Robert, but then that connection, his third eye starts to creak open, and Littlefinger, wherever he's at, sees it and jumps in. I believe, Littlefinger, to your point, Casey, old new dude. Littlefinger does have that talent. A lot of people, you and I had a long argument with David. About that, right? That Littlefinger does have that. I'm firmly in that camp. I think the Order of the Green Hand's the first place I saw it. I don't know if it was their theory to begin with or not, or if they picked it up in the forums and then brought it out. But I do believe that the evidence is pretty good. I think their Littlefinger videos are probably their best videos out of all of what they did, actually.
They don't have a bad video, that's for sure.
What's that?
I said they don't have a bad video at all.
Yeah, I mean, they do a good job with their research. I disagree with their conclusions quite a bit, but I think that's probably one of their best anyway.
Yeah, I definitely don't always agree with their conclusions, but yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah. Well, point is though, we're talking about a traumatic injury being something that helps you to open your eye. Well, let's think who else in this three people that we're talking about, Robert, Littlefinger, and Ned, also had a traumatic injury, right? Littlefinger. Brandon nearly killed him, right? He was bedridden for days, and then he slowly makes his way back from River. Once he's well enough to travel, he slowly makes his way back through the Riverlands to the Vale, right? And so we talk about Harrenhal being a place of power, etc. We obviously that's part of Arya's story as well. And Littlefinger, of course, lobbies and finds his way into being the Lord of Harrenhal in this story. So I wonder if he also spent some time there on his way back, right? I would think that would be on the way back from River Run to the high road, right? To the end of the crossroads. I'm not sure. The map. I'm not very good with the maps. So,
well, I mean, it was the Order of the Green Hand, or I think that it was Littlefinger that told Brandon that Rhaegar abducted Lyanna.
I think that's a reasonable theory. There's nothing in the text to say it absolutely happened, but it totally makes sense.
Lots of people.
I want to say that they thought that the end of the crossroads is where this all happened at.
Yeah.
It could very well have happened near Harrenhal, because that's where she was hanging out at.
Well, the end of the crossroads is not very far from Harrenhal, right?
Right.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So I think those two things, to me, his obsession with Harrenhal and that injury he had, and this evidence we see where literally we look, like you say, Ned pulls away his face. So the faceless man, literal faceless man, symbolism there.
Right.
Well, I think it's a pretty clear thing that we're supposed to wonder, hey, does he have it? Now, in my case, I wonder, and then I say, yeah, I think he does, right?
Yeah.
So to me,
I mean, he even tells you at the beginning that he made plans to keep himself sane, building castles of hope in the darkness. I mean, he's preparing his mind from the get-go in that darkness to guard himself.
Right. And then, so the other thing is, sorry, Richard, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I was going to ask you a question at the end of it anyway. So the context of this, again, is this chapter is right after the Sansa chapter, where she went to the throne room and pleaded for Eddard's life, right? For mercy. And they basically gave her a bunch of conditions on giving him that mercy, right? He needs to accept Joffrey as his king, right? And he needs to denounce his words, et cetera, all sorts of conditions. And so immediately, Littlefinger, we also want to understand motivations. Littlefinger, one of the motivations he has is, it had been Catelyn, but I think at this point he's paying attention to Sansa. So he feels strongly that what Sansa wants to feel good is something that you need to be. He wants to. He's starting now to want to get into Sansa's good graces. He's starting to want to start his, let's say, move of control, whatever you want to call it, into Sansa's story. So the first thing he would want to do is to make sure that Eddard is playing ball. Now, of course, I think that if Littlefinger has this power, he's not just using it on Eddard. He's using it on who?
Joffrey.
Yes, of course, Joffrey. That's right. So it's interesting. He's playing both sides of this one. He's manipulating both Eddard and Joffrey in what comes next.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his part, he looks good in Sansa's eyes. It's right. Joffrey that becomes the one that all the blame can be put on, and it was his doing, and it was Littlefinger's doing to begin with. So he comes out like he's trying to help and get on the good graces, and he still gets to stay on that good side of Sansa because Joffrey's the one that did it. Now Joffrey's the one she hates, and then somebody's got to save her, and then boom, there's Littlefinger later on. I mean,
and what is Littlefinger's kind of mantra when, like, if you think forward in to A Storm of Swords, Littlefinger says, "Oh, you don't want to leave witnesses behind." That's why he kills Dantas Hollard, right?
yeah.
And so, if he's involved in these things and manipulating Joffrey, and there's a George R. R. Martin SSM where he basically says that, well, Littlefinger somebody asked a question about did Littlefinger do something with the dagger at Winterfell. He said Martin doesn't answer the question, but he says, well, Littlefinger has a certain level of influence on Joffrey. That's what it says. It's a very simple, very nebulous
statement, but it does seem to imply something like that. Yeah.
And then he says, but you got to remember that Littlefinger wasn't there at Winterfell. Well, how would Littlefinger, influence somebody from far away?
Yeah, he basically.
I can't guess. How would that happen?
Yeah, he's yelling it from the rooftops. The skin changer. I mean,
maybe. So I'm actually not entirely convinced that. I think that he wants that interpretation to be valid. I keep going back to this, right? That I think he likes the books to be ambiguous. I think he wants there to be multiple interpretations. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we never learn definitively that Littlefinger had any powers at all.
Well, we won't. So Jaime and Tyrion come to the conclusion that Joffrey did it. And I believe that, yes, Joffrey did do it. I just think that Littlefinger showed up as Robert in Joffrey's head and told him to do it.
I actually don't think that Joffrey did it. I think that he never hires people, that he wouldn't give away his only Valyrian steel, that the logic that he knows Valyrian steel, therefore he would give away his only Valyrian steel, that he's remembering things wrong is basically, I believe it's an interpretation that the author intended. It's a valid interpretation. I don't share that interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Joffrey's stupid enough, and he did act weird when Tyrion said that. Now, the way Tyrion did it wasn't nearly as definitive as Tyrion makes it.
Right.
I totally buy that. I'm with you there.
Right, and he never pays for anything. He orders people. He wouldn't hang out with that kind of person. Mance Rayder would hang out with a guy who would look like that. Mance Rayder brought the silver to Winterfell. He tells us he brought a bag of silver to Winterfell. We don't really see bags of silver that much in the series, other than that, and we do. We see the dowry payment of Fat Walden. We see some bags of silver over in Essos and amongst the merchant class and so forth. But it's reasonably rare. I mean, Cat is handed the same bag of silver we're talking about, and then proceeds to use it to pay the pay each man who rose and so forth. So I'm not saying that silver is like completely rare. It's like it's a $2 bill or 50-cent piece or whatever. I'm just saying that it's somewhat rare, and it's rather suspicious that a guy who might be motivated to frame Robert, who's the actual owner of the dagger, is present. Tyrion talks about the fact that you wouldn't send a blade at all. At one point, he thinks about it was very clever to poison an old man because nobody would suspect that there was even murder at all. And it's really strange to have used a dagger at all. Not just it's a fool who uses his own blade, but come to think of it, that's really clumsy. This is a boy who's expected to die at any moment, right? Somebody decided to use a dagger. Why would they do that? He says, there must be a third player that we're not even thinking about. And then he gets distracted. George does this famous distraction. Oh, they're just about to realize what's going on here. And he distracts him from it. And the line of thought stops.
In my opinion, the mention of the silver is George R. R. Martin trying to hide it from us at the beginning, right? The bag of silver is mentioned. And yes, we are supposed to think about it, but I don't think he intended that actually to be the culprit. Does that make sense?
As I said, I believe he intended multiple interpretations here. I think that he certainly intended a valid interpretation to include Joffrey did it, right? Yep. And your argument is, yes, it doesn't make sense, and that's why it had to have been influence. And that takes care of the logic. And that's a great answer, because most people don't get that answer, right? Most people are like, oh no, Tyrion remembers this, and it's obviously right. And you're saying, no, I agree that it doesn't make that much sense. He would have had to have been influenced for him to have done it this clumsily and so forth, right? And the reason that Littlefinger obviously has motivation, right? He wants to frame someone, whether that's Robert, or if he gets the opportunity to recast that as Tyrion, it's even better. At the time, it's creating additional chaos and strife between whether that winds up being between Robert and Ned, or even better if it's the Lannisters and Ned, right? And so anyway, your answer is I think a better interpretation of the default Joffrey interpretation.
Yeah,
I like
making sense of it, right? So I don't.
I'm going to stick with Mance Rayder, but I definitely think your version of Joffrey did it, which is already supposed to be an interpretation that he's attempting to communicate to readers. I think you do a better job of making that fit than most people.
And the reason I want to make it fit in this way is because, again, we think of motivations of a character. Who's motivated to, if Mance were doing it, it literally was as a mercy. It's not that strong of a motivator to.
Well, that's supposedly why Joffrey did it too, though. By everybody in the fandom claims that.
No, but in my interpretation,
right. Yours is better. Again, yours fits his character better. I get that.
He did it to please his father. Now, of course, Joffrey's a psychopath, so he doesn't know how to please his father properly.
Well,
right?
And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. But go on.
Yeah, so he did it, but also because literally he's following orders in this case. He's been brainwashed in his dreams to do it. Now, what I want to say is that's kind of a sidebar. When we talk about the here and now, where it's at now, also Littlefinger, like I said, if he's doing this, if he's doing mental manipulation and he's doing it on Joffrey, what he's doing to Joffrey right now is appearing to him as dreams as Robert, and basically saying he betrayed me, do this, and he's leading.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's leading Joffrey to Janos Slynt and setting it up the next scene in Arya's chapter, right?
That makes sense.
So that's why I wanted to bring it up more than to go back to the
right. And as I said, I actually don't expect this to ever be revealed definitively either way. I think I think George likes ambiguity and he likes multiple interpretations and he likes the discussions and so
yeah, I'm just saying in this case, if we take it that it was Littlefinger, it explains all three of those things that Littlefinger benefited from, right?
Yep, and that's always a nice way to look at things is who benefits, right? So there's the argument of, well, maybe Mance Rayder was trying to create strife between Robert and Ned and failed, but definitely Littlefinger wound up benefiting because he gets to even be the source of the information and claim that it's Tyrion's dagger, even though it was really Robert's, right?
Yeah.
Shall we continue?
Yep. Go ahead.
He could no longer tell the difference between waking and sleeping. The memory came creeping upon him in the darkness, as vivid as a dream. It was the year of false spring, and he was 18 again, down from the Eyrie to the tourney at Harrenhal. He could see the deep green of the grass, smell the pollen on the wind. Warm days and cool nights and the sweet taste of wine. He remembered Brandon's laughter and Robert's berserk valor in the melee, where he laughed as he unhorsed men left and right. He remembered Jaime Lannister, a golden youth in scaled white armor, kneeling on the grass in front of the king's pavilion and making his vows to protect and defend King Aerys. Afterwards, Sir Oswell Went helped Jaime to his feet, and the White Bull himself, Lord Commander Sir Gerald Hightower, fastened the snowy cloak of the Kingsguard about his shoulders. All 6 white swords were there to welcome their newest brother. Yet when the jousting began, the day belonged to Rhaegar Targaryen. Crown Prince wore the armor he would die in, gleaming black plate, the 3-headed dragon of his house wrought in rubies on the breast. A plume of scarlet silk streamed behind him when he rode, and it seemed no lance could touch him. Brandon fell to him, and Bronzeon Royce, and even the splendid Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning. Robert had been jesting with Jon and old Lord Hunter as the prince circled the field after unhorsing Sir Barristan, the final tilt to claim the champion's crown. Ned remembered the moment when all the smiles died, when Prince Rhaegar Targaryen urged his horse past his own wife, the Dornish princess, Elia Martell, to lay the Queen of Beauty's laurel in Lyanna's lap. He could see it still, a crown of winter roses, blue as frost. Ned Stark reached out his hand to grasp the flowery crown, but beneath the pale blue petals the thorns lay hidden. He felt them clawing at his skin, sharp and cruel, saw the slow trickle of blood run down his fingers, and woke, trembling in the dark. "Promise me, Ned," his sister had whispered from her bed of blood. She had loved the scent of winter roses. "God save me," Ned wept. "I'm going mad." The gods did not deign to answer. Perhaps the gods agree.
Well, I think the fact that we go to Ned's gods right there in that moment, I think it tells us we're actually witnessing the presence of the gods again. I think Eddard's third eye is opening, and I think when you listen to that entire discussion of the attorney at Harrenhal, every single thing he sees in that, up to the point where he reaches out his hand and pricks himself on the rose, which clearly is metaphorical, right? Everything there is exactly what happened. That is, I believe, he's no longer going on his own weak memories, right? His own false memories, but it's not like the fever dreams before.
Where like a weirwood and left like a fever dream. Yeah.
He is seeing exactly what happened. I think he's pulling that directly from the weirwoods, right? So the fact that we're discussing the old gods right at the end of that is, I mean, to me, I think that's a really good allusion to what we just saw, in that it was his third eye opening. It's just a reinforcement of what we just talked about.
Just stop and think about how he described Jaime Lannister. There's not a bad word at all. So if that was his true memory of it, the way he feels about Jaime Lannister, his opinion on what was going on, you would be able to feel some rage or hate or something coming through the words. So I agree with you. He's seeing that from the Weirwood's perspective. So it's not his memory, it's the Weirwood Net's memory of what's happening there.
Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I like this interpretation. I think it's, I mean, he even calls it out as it's odd to have memory be this clear, and he knows it's a memory, right? So it seems like he knows that this is true, whereas, certainly George was
as they have been in life or anything like that, right? It's exactly what it's almost objective truth, right?
Right. It's really so anyway, I agree with your interpretation here. This feels like it's deliberately, whether that's because Bran or the old gods or the three-eyed crow or whatever you want to say is coming to him and deciding that he should see this, or whether it's because he's tapped into the Weirwood Net, as people call it, although I wish we called it the Weirwood Web, because then it'd be www. But anyway.
I'll make a note of that.
www.net. That's how I write it sometimes in my essays. Yeah.
But anyway, I absolutely love that interpretation of it.
But sorry, before you go on, Richard, promises. Promise me, Ned. Right? That's our is it seventh and final promise me, Ned? He thinks about promises, I think, 8 times, but literally promise me in that specific iteration of it. That's the last time we hear it. I think it's 7 times in this book. So we talked about the promises earlier. I don't think we need to rehash them, but
right.
I think we want to put a pin in it that this is something that has driven his character throughout the entire way. And now what's coming next is going to be, we talk about children and protecting children, regardless of what those children are.
Right.
It comes home to him right here in this next part.
So the promise me, Ned, at that specific point, is that because the Weirwood Web shows him, the promise me, Ned, has something to do with what's transpiring in that vision?
Well, the Winter Roses ties it together in his mind.
Yeah, he pricks himself on the Winter Roses, and that reminds him of the hurt that he's felt from having to meet. well, broken promises, because I think he dreamt about that a couple chapters back, right?
Yeah.
Broken
Well,
promises
you read this one too.
everything is done to him in order to meet those promises to the best of his ability, right?
Yeah, we're in this chapter that he said he dreamed of broken promises. This is the chapter where he talked about broken promises.
So is it this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he has a lot of nightmares, so I think that again is Littlefinger putting his thumb on the scale of Ned's brain throughout the entire time in the black cells.
Could be. Where were we here? Oh yeah, the gods not dead. Food, he croaked. Wine, a voice answered. It was not the rat-faced man. This jailer was stouter, shorter, but he wore the same leather half-cape and spiked steel cap. Drink, Lord Eddard. He thrust a wineskin into Ned's hands. The voice was strangely familiar, yet it took Ned Stark a moment to place it. Barris, he said groggily when it came. He touched the man's face. I'm not dreaming this. You're here. Duke's plump cheeks were covered with a dark stubble of beard. Ned felt the coarse hair with his fingers. Barris had transformed himself into a grizzled turnkey, reeking of sweat and sour wine. What sort of magician are you? So we've discussed previously that Dorcas probably knows and uses the conjurer's tricks. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Guy.
I don't know. I mean, I think he's said it several times that he's against magic, and I believe him on that standpoint. But obviously he's doing all the mundane things. He's learned all of those mundane
Well,
tricks.
you could argue he's a mummer. He's a trained mummer. He would be able to do some of these things without magic. Sure. It's my experience that usually when you deal with an anti-magic person in a fantasy, they actually have not only just studied all of the conjurer's tricks, they tend to actually use them. They tend to be hypocrites.
I'm not sure if he does or not. Certainly, it would be kind of difficult to communicate with the little birds who are mute, and probably are also it would be pretty difficult to communicate if he doesn't. But let's go ahead and say that. But even if he's true and he doesn't, even if he means that, right, and he's not a liar.
Right.
Oh, and I absolutely know he's a liar to some degree. But even if he doesn't know that, he could be unconsciously using it, right?
Sure.
Well, I mean, he falls into the same category as some of the other characters that we think have skin-changing abilities. Euron, Littlefinger, Bran, obviously, we know for a fact he's got skin-changing abilities, Greenseer. I mean, at a young age, Varys was cut and thrown into the gutter and almost dies there. So I think that puts him into, did the 3-Eyed Crow branch out?
He had that traumatic experience as well. Absolutely. So I don't discount that it's possible.
And he specifically
he doesn't know he's doing it if he does.
He specifically has studied the conjurer's tricks. He knows all the conjurer's tricks. To me, people who study magic and want to eliminate it tend to actually use it in most fantasy stories.
Sure.
The younger girl escaped Sir Meryn and fled, Varys told him. I've not been able to find her, nor have the Lannisters. Dorcas usually knows everything, but he doesn't know where Arya is.
I find that odd.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
Well,
he doesn't want to tell people that he does, even if people have theorized that Dorcas, as I like to call him, never breaks character. Essentially, that he will, that if he says things, it's because he wants people to believe them. That he may know that Aegon is not really who he claims, but he still claims that Aegon is Aegon the Sixth, basically, right? And I think none of us actually believe that Aegon is literally the Aegon who history will probably refer to as Aegon the Sixth. If you watched my third video, that in the real world, when there's restorations, it's pretty common that there's been some person who has been, and this actually happens with the Blackfires with the Daemon the Second and Daemon the Third, but it's pretty common that in George's world, in addition to our world, for example, when Louis the 17th and 18th, right? There's no actual. I mean, there is a character known to history as Louis the 17th, but there was never anybody crowned as Louis the 17th. There's a character known to history as Napoleon the Second, but there's never anybody who ruled as Napoleon the Second. There's a character in the story of Daemon the Second Blackfire but he was never crowned or named Daemon II Blackfire. So anyway, the point is, so I like to refer to Aegon VI as the babe who was actually killed by Gregor, right?
Sure.
Just because as I said, it fits the restorations in our world. It fits it fits with the Daemon III Blackfire.
I think, and we have to identify these folks who don't end up taking the crown some way, right? So to me, Rhaena's husband, I call him Aegon the Zero, right? because he never sat the throne, but he, when Maegor took over, he ought to have been first in line if you do male preference prima donna.
That's the uncrowned?
Was that?
The uncrowned, as they call him?
Yeah, the son of Aenys, right?
Well, I mean, but it isn't the term in the history book uses.
Oh, did they finally give him a name?
I thought they called him Aegon the Uncrowned.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I get your point. I guess I hadn't really thought about that.
So, and part of the point of that is then it means that the next Aegon that gets crowned will be known to history as Aegon VII, and that makes more for them to, and ideally somebody could reveal. Ideally, what would happen is somebody would actually reveal that, oh, you're actually this other Aegon and not the Aegon VI, so that you'd actually be crowned as Aegon VII, and then you get some additional symbolism during the rule. But either way, the history book should refer to the next Aegon as Aegon VII. Just to, if they're going to match Daemon III Targaryen and Napoleon III and Louis the 18th.
They probably won't, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and so speaking of Aegon, though, there's another thing I want to talk about politically when we or not really politically. This is more just how books are written, how series come about. We know George and his gardening tendencies rather than his he doesn't fully outline things.
Right.
I think there's an argument to be made at this point. George himself doesn't even know what whether Aegon is a thing or not.
He likes to keep his options open. Absolutely.
Right. So it may be that he was supporting, something else, or maybe he thought they've got some other plot, but he hadn't really thought through in his mind, right? So I think we got to consider that there's a possibility that at this point Varys is actually thinking about putting Dany and her child on the throne instead of.
There's so much symbolism that he's given that he's legitimate. That it's funny because half of it people are like, oh well, it's funny because Varys is setting this up to look like he's legitimate, but the person who gives him the only other straw hat is George, not Varys, right? Varys doesn't arrange for him to wear a wide-brimmed straw hat, whereas literally there's only 2 straw hats in the entire series, and they're both wide-brimmed straw hats worn by Aegon posing as commoners who are going to go on to become Aegon as king. He's done a lot of symbolism where he's the dragon. He's the young dragon, right? He gives the exact same speech as the young dragon. It's impossible not to recognize that he's being the young dragon. Greyways Tim had this big long thread of all the ways that George is saying he's legit in terms of symbolism, right? And does that mean that he's going to be Aegon VI? No, I don't think so. But it's not just it's funny because he's like David Lightbringer is always saying that he's a pale imitation and we're supposed to realize that he's a fake. And I'm like, no, it's symbolism that's supposed to make him look like he's legit. Now, does that because as I said, so much of it is not like Varys didn't arrange for him to have a big hedge knight named Duck, right? That's George that arranged him to have a big hedge knight named Duck.
Well, so I think again, just in the writing process, we can talk about the writing process. George came up with the Mummer's Dragon when he's writing A Clash of Kings, right? Which by the time they actually published this book, Clash of Kings was probably mostly already written, right? So he may have put a few retcons in there. I'm just wondering when he actually wrote this.
He wrote the first three so fast that he had to have had chapters, maybe even of the third book by the time you get the first book published, right? Because he wrote those. He wrote this in it's 4 years from the time of the first one to the time of the third one coming out. So he was going. The ideas at least were in there, right?
Yeah. So it was all coming together right around the time that this chapter was published. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
The other thing we want to consider though is the Blackfire backstory. That whole thing. he doesn't introduce that until the Sworn Sword. So the Sworn Sword, when did that come out? I didn't look it up. I probably should have.
I thought it was pretty much not too long after there.
Not too long after A Storm of Swords, I don't think.
Yeah.
So I think all of that was coming together, in those two, while those two books were coming. But in Game of Thrones, when he first wrote this chapter, I'm not sure he knew exactly where that was going.
Right.
But let's keep going, because I definitely want to talk a little more about what Varys says to him.
Well, the entire history of Blackfire, it's got to go somewhere. I mean, it's got to lead to something in the story for him to put so much time and emphasis on it. I mean, the places that it could show up are very limited.
Well, and I've always wondered if, in fact, if it doesn't wind up being Aegon, which I don't think it is, but one area I could see is what's the name of the spy master? He kind of looks like a Targaryen. The Golden Company spy master. I'm blanking on his name. Anyway.
Either way, the presence of the Gold Company is very suspicious, no matter what.
Right. I trust you realize that you are a dead man, Lord Eddard. So obviously that's some significant foreshadowing.
Subtle.
Yeah. Can you free me from this pit? I could, but will I? No. Questions would be asked, and the answers would lead back to me. Ned doesn't have the same leverage that Jaime will have later.
Well, I think it's interesting, though. We talk about parallels to these other earlier prequels and all that, and we know that Varys did abscond with a very useful and person later on in the story. And
presumably before with John Con as well, right? So and Tyrion is clearly set up to be sort of an echo of Ned in many ways, right? He's marrying Catelyn's daughter. He's actually a bigamist. But I mean, he does almost everything in A Clash of Kings is like he takes a secret passage down way to the brothel to see his lover. He's which is and most of it tends to like line up or nearly line up with the chapters, and he's deliberately an echo of Ned, and later on he's going to be saved from a cell similar to this.
Yeah, so the question obviously is begged, would Varys have tried to steal him from the ship to the Night's Watch and brought him over to Essos to help Dany? I think signs point to yes if I got out my magic 8-ball, right?
Right. Would you at least consent to carry a message out for me? That would depend on the message. I will gladly provide you with paper and ink if you like. And when you've written what you will, I will take the letter and read it and deliver it or not as best serves my own ends. Your own ends. What ends are those, Lord Varys? Peace, Varys replied without hesitation. At least for now, we know Dorcas wants to delay. We've specifically heard delay. Yeah,
there's no mystery as to why he wants peace at this particular moment, because he's been told to delay. Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious if he ever actually came back and brought paper and pen, and if so, what that message would be.
Basically, he didn't need to, because he says coming up that Cersei's going to visit him.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think he kind of loses track of that, because once he sees we're get there, right? I mean, he basically is going to be told Cersei's going to come to you, and you're going to get the choice, and you better decide, because here's the consequences of your choice, right? So
he doesn't need to.
So he was kind of desperate and thought he was being basically locked away with no communication, and that's not the case. He's going to have the opportunity to go to the wall, to communicate with everyone, and so forth. So it kind of is there's some debate. Preston doesn't like people saying moot point, but it's kind of a moot point.
Okay.
At least for now, we know Dorcas wants to play. Okay. What strange fit of madness led you to tell the queen that you had learned the truth of Joffrey's birth? The madness of mercy, Ned admitted. Ah, said Varys, to be sure. You're an honest and honorable man, Lord Eddard. Oftentimes I forget that. I've met so few of them in my life. He glanced around the cell. Want to see what honesty and honor have won you? I understand why. And then a little later, it was not wine that killed the king. It was your mercy. Ned had feared as much. Gods forgive me. If there are gods, Varys said, I expect they will. The queen would not have waited long in any case. Robert was becoming unruly, and she needed to be rid of him to free her hands to deal with his brothers. If Bran is the old gods, I expect they would show mercy. Or forgiveness, rather.
Mm-hmm.
You have been foolish, my lord. You ought to have heeded Littlefinger when he urged you to support Joffrey's succession. How did you know of that? Varys smiled. I know. That's all that need concern you. I also know that on the morrow the queen will pay you a visit. Renly and Littlefinger both had similar ideas, and rejecting their wisdom was indeed foolish.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's because of motivations, character motivations.
Yep.
That's one thing George R. R. Martin excels at.
Yep.
Right? He understands not just his heroes or partial kind of heroes, great heroes. Let's call them. He understands his villains or his on that end of the spectrum, folks. Right. He even understands Euron and what motivates him. I don't understand it yet. We'll be getting there, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And so he does a really good job of making their actions match what their motivations would be. And obviously, in this case, Renly's not going to just stick around when his motivation is to keep his own head on top of his shoulders. Littlefinger's not just going to blindly follow what Ned said, because Ned is the one who's been given that piece of paper shield, right?
Well, I mean, Littlefinger probably correctly believes that Stannis would discover what a crook he is, may even already suspect, and
yeah,
then
he probably already knows. Yeah,
exactly. Spike, right?
They've been on the small council for quite a while. He definitely knows Stannis' opinion of him.
Yeah, and Varys is the same way. That neither one of them finds Stannis as an acceptable option.
No, I mean Stannis wouldn't find them as acceptable options to continue being
right. That's why he's not acceptable to them.
Yeah.
Sansa begged so sweetly, it would be a shame if you threw it all away. You're being given your life back if you'll take it. Cersei is no fool. She knows a tame wolf is of more use than a dead one. You want me to serve the woman who murdered my king, butchered my men, and crippled my son? Ned's voice was thick with disbelief. I want you to serve the realm, Varys said. Tell the queen that you will confess your vile treason. Command your son to lay down his sword and proclaim Joffrey as the true heir. Offer to denounce Stannis and Renly as faithless usurpers. Our green-eyed lioness knows you are a man of honor. If you will give her the peace she needs and the time to deal with Stannis, pledge to carry her secret to your grave, I believe she will allow you to take the black and live out the rest of your days on the wall with your brother and that base-born son of yours. The thought of Jon filled Ned with a sense of shame and a sorrow too deep for words. If only he could see the boy again, sit and talk with him. Pain shot through his broken leg beneath the filthy gray plaster of his cast. He winced, his fingers opening and closing helplessly. Is this your own scheme? He gasped out at Varys. Are you in league with Littlefinger? That seemed to amuse the eunuch. I would sooner wed the black goat of Qohor. Littlefinger is the second most devious man in the Seven Kingdoms. So Dorcas might actually believe Aegon is what the realm needs. His confidence in his status as most devious to Littlefinger's second place is probably justified.
There you go. Well, I think just in that paragraph before that, the thought of Ned, or the thought of Jon filled Ned with a sense of shame. It's funny that he's going down and you get the, if only he could see them again, sit the boy down, talk with him, and then boom, you get a shot of pain. And then that stops the train of thought of where he was taking that sentence. So there was something that was getting added on. It's the same as when Varys steps in on Littlefinger and Cat.
Yeah, little distractions.
Right.
Oh, I'm about to get you know what's really going on here. Nope, sorry.
Yeah, the pain was that stopped the sentence, and I hate when he does that.
Yep.
Well, he was very much still hiding a lot of things from us at that point in the story, right?
Oh yeah.
Hope to keep his option open, and because he does know some of the things that are coming, right?
Yep. Right. Let's do it all the way to the end here. Varys, gods have mercy. Do as you like with me, but leave my daughter out of your schemes. Sansa's no more than a child. Rhaenys was a child too. Prince Rhaegar's daughter, a precious little thing, younger than your girls. She had a small black kitten she called Balerion. Did you know? I always wondered what happened to him. Rhaenys liked to pretend he was the true Balerion, the black dread of old. But I imagine the Lannisters taught her the difference between a kitten and a dragon quick enough the day they broke down her door. Ferris gave a long, weary sigh, the sigh of a man who carried all the sadness of the world in a sack upon his shoulders. The High Septon once told me that as we sin, so do we suffer. If that's true, Lord Eddard, tell me, why is it always the innocents who suffer while you most when you High Lords play your Game of Thrones? Ponder it, if you would, while you wait upon the Queen. And spare a thought for this as well. The next visitor who calls on you could bring you bread and cheese and the milk of the poppy for your pain, or he could bring you Sansa's head. The choice, my dear Lord Han, is entirely yours. Love is the bane of honor, the death of duty. Right, we get that whole discussion, and Jon says that doesn't sound right, and Maester Aemon explains that if it comes down to those you love or your duty and your honor, you're gonna sacrifice your duty and your honor and go with those you love.
Right, and so I think what George R. R. Martin is telling us there is you're not necessarily even wrong to do that, right?
Right. No, when Jon says he would do whatever is right, it's a cop-out answer because honestly, what's right is to do what's right honor is coin to be spent for you and your family, right? Our honor is coin to be spent for the realm, as the Night's Watch, as Court Halfhand says, right?
So Ned capitulating here is the right thing to do, even if it is lying, and even if he feels like it's besmirching his honor, right? I mean,
right.
So,
it's supposed to be. Love is supposed to be the bane of honor and the death of duty because it should come above, right? That family, duty, honor, right? As the Tullys would say, they're telling you this is the order. This is the correct order, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, is that what you put up in the back there?
I got Tully behind me right here.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, you're absolutely right. And that I guess I never thought about it that way, but it's telling you the correct order. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Jon's answer is technically correct, and it's the opposite of what he thinks he's saying. Right? He thinks he's saying that you would stick with the honor and the duty, but no, the right answer is family comes first. And
that's why, and when you go to the whole deal at the end of his story in Dance with Dragons.
Family comes first.
He's going to rescue Arya. Screw his Night's Watch.
Yeah, there been people complaining about that recently on Reddit. There was a big long post. They're like, "Oh, it's against his character and stuff." I'm like, no, it's him realizing that that's the correct answer.
I've been on Reddit one time.
Sorry, Casey, go ahead.
No, I said I've been on Reddit one time, and that's it. I don't go on there.
No, I have trouble on there too. I mean, I used to go on early on when I was getting into this, but stuff you post things that are well thought out, and it has 5 or 6 or more paragraphs in it, and it just gets buried. People. You can post the exact same thing one day, and get you get downvoted a bunch, and you post almost the same idea the next day and get like 20 upvotes or something. It's like, I don't know about these people. It's like anyway.
That's a pretty good chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys like to talk about the show a little bit.
Okay.
I find it funny that Ned, of course he in the end comes to the right answer, right? It doesn't really matter, and also it's funny. It really doesn't matter who succeeded Robert either, right? So the reason I was on Twitter earlier today, the reason Joffrey was a bad choice to succeed Robert is because he was a psychopath, not because he wasn't Robert's blood, right?
Right.
That was why he was bad, right? But of course, Ned's using that to get there. He knows Joffrey's not a good answer, but he's also, in this case, choosing the honorable thing to go with Lord Stannis, right? And it's put plain to us. Okay, so that's the backdrop. And Ned, in the end, because of family, because of Sansa, ends up throwing that away. But earlier, he made the wrong decision.
And Ned doesn't know any reason to believe that Stannis would be a bad king. I think we've seen especially after this, reasons to believe that Stannis would not be acceptable to the realm. And we know he's not acceptable to counselors. We've seen that now. Now, was that obvious to Ned? No, I don't think it was. Right? I don't think he had anything that tells him that's. I don't think he's got enough information to realize how unacceptable Stannis is likely to be.
Right, but again, at the time when he pressed that Stannis's claim in the throne room, it wasn't. He wasn't doing it for the right reasons. He was doing it for the honorable reasons, right?
Right.
Which again, they're the weakest of the three of the
seven. Right. Absolutely.
What I want to talk about though is Rhaenyra and her heirs being bastards, and the fact that it really doesn't matter. Nobody, just like the case of Joffrey and Myrcella and Tommen, Rhaenyra's three bastards were never questioned by their father. They were never questioned by the king, but
still half Targaryen.
In this case, everyone is making it and justifying the fact that those three kids probably weren't Laenor's. To be a reason for her not to ascend the throne.
And I actually do think it's intended to be ambiguous, and that there's actually a lot of reasons why you can interpret it the other way, right, from the books by the fact that you can either watch Preston's video, or you could read the Coconut Gods post on Reddit on that, but there's absolutely reasons why you can interpret it as they're actual trueborn. Now, but it's meant to be ambiguous. It's meant to be interpreted both ways and to have different symbolism both ways, right? And parallels and things, right? So Rhaenyra, one option with Rhaenyra is she is sleeping with her husband and her lover, and deciding, if you take the trueborn interpretation, and deciding that they'd be trueborn. If you take the bastard interpretation, then she has interesting parallels with Rhaenys, especially if you believe that Rhaenys' kids are bastards. I mean, Rhaenys the Conqueror, right? Yeah. So if you believe Rhaenys' kids are bastards, then she has really interesting parallels with Rhaenys, in that she believes that it's her duty to produce the heirs, right? Potentially, even based on prophecy, believes that she must produce heirs, and that her husband is incapable of producing heirs, and therefore she has an obligation to the realm to find a sperm donor, basically, right? That's and I think he wants some of this symbolism to exist in both directions when he writes in ambiguous things, right? That it's intended for you to say, oh yeah, as Preston does, oh yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. Of course, she would have trueborn children, and that's a reasonable interpretation, but it's also, but arguably it's Cersei flipped on her head and saying, yes, she's sleeping with her lover, yes, she's sleeping with her husband, she's decided which one of them to have her kids with, and that's interesting in one way. But then you also have, as I said, you get lots of interesting parallels and things the other way as well. And I think throughout the all of the ambiguity, and Casey, when you get to this reading through all of Fire and Blood, ton of deliberate ambiguity. Like the whole book is telling you this is an ambiguous work, right? It's
you get three interpretations multiple times.
Right.
The thing that to me that's most sorry, I didn't stop you from finishing your thought.
Go ahead.
The thing to me that's most important though to think about is those strong boys. I'm going to say because I think it's funny the way the line goes, right? With Aemon, but they are only an issue because the High Towers made it an issue, right? Just like Joffrey and Myrcella and Tommen are only an issue because Ned and then Stannis made it an issue.
Right. And I'm not convinced that Jon Arryn was ever going to reveal that. I think he probably knew, and he was joking with the king, right? He'd been joking with the king before he died. I don't think he had any intention of plunging the realm into a civil war.
Yeah, and he was killed not for that. Ned's totally wrong about that. He was killed because
he was mad at his wife. For some reason during this research, he became very mad with his wife, and he wanted to take Sweet Robin away from her and foster him, right? For some reason, as he researched all this genetics things, he became very angry with his wife. I can't figure out why that would be.
Because Sweet Robin might actually be Littlefinger's kid.
Sweet Robin does not have the Aaron look, and Harry the Heir does, right? Harry the Heir looks apparently exactly like John Aaron looked when he was young.
Yeah, I think that's the whole hilarious thing is that it probably is Littlefinger's kid, and yet everyone thinks he's trying to kill him.
Yeah,
I find the whole thing kind of funny.
Yeah,
right? But the point is, the Realm, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders and moved on when Stannis publicized this whole information. So this whole thing that it must come to war. Oh, your brother, if she takes the throne, she's gonna naturally kill your entire line out, right? The whole idea that this all is inevitable,
right?
It's insane, right? Because we already know from the main story that nobody gave a shit.
Right. Right.
It's like
the truth is what the rulers say it is. The problem is that the ruler is the hand and the queen, right? That they basically become the rulers, and they use their position to launch a coup.
Yeah, and if Rhaenyra had been
did you read page 204?
And if Alicent and her kids had been on Dragonstone, that war would have started differently or not at all, right? But
did you read page 204 and why my interpretation would be that the Maesters are just lying when they even say this was a question?
Oh, the Maesters conspiracy. It's they started this show off pretty well with hinting but for some reason they gave Mellos nothing to say. They cut his lines from the I don't know what they're doing. They started out so well by showing the Maester conspiracy, and then it's just gone by the second half of the season.
I've taken it to just saying, this is their interpretation of things. It's an interesting version of it. Let's watch and enjoy what it is, which is their interpretation of things, and realizing that there's so much better. There's so many things that could be better, and some things that they've left out. There's also some interesting things that they've injected that I would have never thought of that are great to see too, those, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a problem in general. I was surprised that they kind of forgot about the whole Maester conspiracy at the second half of the season. Because it was all there, so plain black and white in the first few first few.
Right. And as I said, my interpretation is what was really going on here is there was never any real question. Nobody ever thought anything other than Rhaenyra is supposed to inherit. Because the law is very clear, as we told you, page 204, right? As it specifically says, you're not allowed to give any of your titles, any of your land, any of your holdings to the kids of your second wife, right? And it's sort of implied that was sort of the tradition becoming codified as a specific law, right? Did you read page 204?
Oh, I didn't get there yet. We'll talk about it later.
All right.
I've been moving for the last 2 weeks.
That's all right. That's all right. Anyway, the point is in page 204, what it does tell you is that they talk about how it's funny because they put it as the problem is that the kids do inherit, and then they would kick out the second wife and her kids and like kick them out to the curb. Right. And so that's the way it was. So they passed the widow's law, which says you're responsible for taking care of the widow. Mm-hmm. OK, so you have an obligation. It said, but it also codified the rights of the children to inherit, meaning and specifically says that you're not allowed to give any of your land, any of your holdings or any of your titles to any children of the second wife.
And
so
when did that was one of
53 AC.
Okay.
53 AC. So that
was one of the Alicent.
So it's literally like we have this concept of inheritance that's just sort of custom and things. This is the one time where they literally codified into the law, and they kind of put as an afterthought. Oh, and by the way, you're not allowed to do this with your second wife.
So
right?
With the physical copy of Fire and Blood, right? That's where
Page 204 is the physical copy. Although if you want to go into like the searcher.org, which is one of the search engines that includes Fire and Blood, if you search for disinheriting their children,
SearchRR.work. Okay, so there's a new one because I've only been on a Search of Ice and Fire waiting for them to.
All right, I'll tweet it out at you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, my copy is I haven't found it yet in the move. Is what I was trying to say. But okay, I've been really waiting for them to put it on this. So you're saying this other one, SearchRR.work.
It doesn't give you the filtering capabilities. It just does like a search of all the stuff of the books and Fire and Blood. So it's kind of it's sometimes you're still going to want a search of Ice and Fire,
yeah, but at least I'll have Fire and Blood available to me. So.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I did not see any changes in the show.
Well, yeah, sorry. This
You don't read the book.
We've gone off on book stuff related to Fire and Blood. So, yeah, no, I mean, what did you think, though, of the last couple episodes?
Actually, Casey, that's not true because remember, you post questions and things like, what did it say in the books? And so I tweeted you out, for example, a link to the Princess and the Queen section on Lenore, the 3 paragraphs that would give you the details of Lenore's death and so forth, right? So you actually have, at times, read tiny little snippets that I've sent you and things. So you have seen differences.
I thought it was great.
So Casey, do you audiobooks? I've almost.
No, I have a hard copy.
What I've read is all on audiobook.
Yeah, I have a hard copy. I just opened it. I've read the first couple of pages a while back, and I'm not a big history buff, and it wasn't my cup of tea.
I made page 204.
What's that?
I made you read page 204.
Yeah, he made me read page 204.
What I was going to say is, rather than reading Fire and Blood, what you could do is just listen to The Princess and the Queen and listen to The Rogue Prince on audiobook.
Right. Well, I mean, I want to read the book now.
The guy who does the audiobook for those two, standalone novellas or short stories, is Ian Glenn, who's Lord Jorah Mormont in the show.
Right.
He does a great job with the narration of it. I really enjoyed listening to those before Fire and Blood came out. I obviously listened to Fire and Blood after that as well, but
I'll definitely have to do the
Fire and Blood is I forget the guy's name. He's an English. He did all the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and all those. He's pretty good, but he's not he's not as good as Ian Glenn. Also, the Hedge Knight and the Sworn Sword, all the Tales of Dunk and Egg. Those are narrated by the Viserys actor.
Harry Lloyd, right?
Harry Lloyd, yeah, and he does a wonderful job with that because he's got the inflections of Egg just down. It's really cool.
It'll feel weird when Winds comes out and they put it to audiobook and it's going to be a different voice from the first 5.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that they're going to actually do different voice actors for different chapters. So have Catelyn, maybe well, not Catelyn. She's not going to have any more chapters, but have Sansa, but potentially be narrated by the actually actor, right? Have Daenerys actually be narrated by Emilia Clarke. That would be really cool, right?
Yeah, instead of actually having somebody take over for the dead, I just do it completely different. That would be awesome.
I think they announced that the guy who did Fire and Blood is going to be doing the Winds of Winter. It
was Harry Lloyd.
Yeah,
Harry Lloyd would be better, but either way, it's too bad Jorah Mormont wouldn't. In my idea, Jorah Mormont wouldn't have a chapter either, but he can narrate anyway. I think it would be really cool. I've seen other ones where they change the actor based on the point of view, and it's worked out really well in those audiobooks. I wish they'd do it with. I know they should have the budget to do it, but whether they will or not is, I guess, a creative decision that they'll have to come up with.
Well, I know when they were doing the history and lore, they would have the associated actor that would be in the North. I forget who it was. It might have been the guy who does GR. But they had different. You got Robert doing some of the history. You got Harry Lloyd doing some of the history. That was pretty cool. I mean, just to hear the voice.
Somebody on Twitter, I forget who it was, Obi Nader, whatever.
Yeah, Obi Nader.
Yeah, he did a thing where he took the Robert Baratheon narration from Histories and Lore, and he put it with the show, the stuff, the scenes from the show. great
Beautiful.
version. Really, really cool what he did with.
Oh yeah. As soon as I saw that, I mean, it's like it was beautiful. It was done quick too.
Yeah. Oh well, we're going to have to tag him on our discussion. Tell him you listen to the whole 120 minutes, and then at the end you're going to hear yourself being called.
There you go. He is the person.
Only 80 minutes long.
Yeah, well, he's the person that invited me to Ice and FireCon.
Oh,
We saw
I think I met him once. We didn't hang out, but several folks I did hang out with. It was pretty cool, even though it's there's no more of the mainstream interpretation folks there. But with you coming, Casey, and I don't know if Richard, if you've made your decision yet. Yeah. What's that?
I'll probably will.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. Anyway, it was definitely fun last time. I'm glad to hear you're coming, and we'll go from there. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, want to wrap it up?
Y'all guys got anything else? Yeah. We're definitely 120 minutes, man. This is a record for us.
80 minutes, guys. 80
okay,
minutes.
everybody.
80 minutes. Come on. It's only 80 minutes. Relax.
Okay. We're good. I mean, it's fine. I made spaghetti an hour before this show to where they could eat. And this has been great. I love it. Short and sweet. That was Eddard 15, a Game of Thrones. We thank Guy, the Green Bard, for joining us on this special occasion. Of course, I'm wearing a Halloween costume for tomorrow, and my hair is in a bow. But again, thank you, the Green Bard. Thank you again, Richard, for always being my co-host. I appreciate it. I love these rereads. And I know this one has been out of order. There's probably, 6 or 7 chapters before this one. So it's all right. It's kind of a standalone chapter for the moment, and we'll drop back to the next one, Arya?
John, I believe. John.
Okay, John. Yeah, we'll jump in next week, probably Wednesday with John, and we will see y'all then. Have a safe and happy Halloween to my co-host and their significant others. And if you're out there, please be very safe. I know Halloween being on a Monday night, there's going to be a lot of people on the roads, a lot of traffic. Some places have switched it to Saturday or even Sunday. But just be careful of your little ones. And we appreciate you stopping by on I'm the only one watching it on my tablet right here. So if you're catching it on the rebound, I do appreciate it. Leave a comment. Check out the Green Bard's chat. I can't link nothing. I'm sorry. So the Green Bard, he's without a doubt probably in my top 5 favorite.
I'll comment on the video so you guys can find me that way if anybody wants to.
Yeah, that'll work. And that's it. We appreciate it. Thank you again to the Green Bard and everybody. Enjoy your Halloween. Bye.
Thanks. I had a great time.
Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Richard.